Hello, Andy Miller here from Calvary Church in Claremorris. Over these few weeks, we're looking at the Christmas story from the Bible, and today we're in Luke chapter 2, verse 1 to 7. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to his own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. It was nearly time for the baby Jesus to be born, and I'm sure Joseph and Mary were preparing their home. But then something really inconvenient happened. The Roman governor, Caesar Augustus, issued a decree that everybody had to go back to their ancestral town to register as a census. Joseph and Mary lived in Nazareth near Galilee, but Joseph's ancestral town was 150 kilometres away in Bethlehem. This was a very difficult journey for a young woman about to give birth, but it was all part of God's plan. You see, about 700 years earlier, God inspired Micah to prophesy, "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." But around the same time, God also spoke through the prophet Isaiah and said that the Messiah would come from the area of Galilee. In the future, he will honour Galilee by the way of the sea, along the Jordan. How could the Messiah come from both Nazareth, around Galilee, and Bethlehem, 150 kilometres apart? Only God could work that out. And he did. But for Mary and Joseph, it meant a long, difficult journey. And when they got to Bethlehem, there was no space to stay, nowhere to go, except that somebody offered them a stable. Stable. Dark, cold, smelly, dirty. That's the place that God chose for his son to be born. And Mary wrapped him in strips of cloth and placed him in a feeding trough for the animals. No fancy house, no fancy clothes, no fancy cot, and no fancy parents. Jesus' birth was marked by humility and poverty. In his life, he never owned very much, never travelled far, never held any great position. He set us an example of love and gentleness and humility. He was crucified with the worst of criminals as he humbly took the punishment for our sins. And he was buried in a borrowed tomb. His birth, his life, and his death were all marked by humility and poverty. And who were the first people that God chose to tell about his birth? Who were the first people that heard about his birth? Shepherds. Men who lived out in the fields by Bethlehem, keeping watch over their sheep. Poor, humble men, no fancy clothes, no fancy houses, maybe a bit uneducated, maybe a bit roughly spoken, maybe even a bit dirty. Maybe men who were known to bend the rules a bit to suit themselves, maybe not the most honest of characters. They heard about his birth from the angels. They went and saw it for themselves. They told everybody about it, and they returned to the field glorifying and praising God. Now that you've heard about Jesus' birth, what will you do about it? Will you just shrug it off and carry on with the busyness of Christmas, shopping, decorating, visiting, partying, cooking? Or will you pause and think about it like these humble shepherds? Will you look into it for yourself? and maybe even consider what it could mean for you. Thanks for listening. Join us again next time as we'll look again at another part of the Christmas story.